1. Wilberforce Cemetery, St John's Church Cemetery, Wilberforce. In the heart of Wilberforce lies one of the oldest and most historically significant cemeteries in Australia, St John's Church Cemetery. Before it was a place of eternal rest, this ground bore witness to the harsh realities of early colonial life. Established in 1811, its earliest burials were not of grand pioneers, but of 3 men who tragically drowned in the unforgiving Hawkesbury River. Here lie the souls of many of the First and Second Fleet arrivals, ex-convicts who, having survived the brutal journey, faced new struggles on this rugged frontier. Their graves tell a story of hard-won freedom, of men and women who built a life from scratch, and of the many who found their final peace here, far from their homeland. But in the stillness of the night, their peace is said to be disturbed. Visitors and locals speak of a profound sense of sorrow that hangs in the air, a grief that seems to emanate from the many unmarked graves. They say the spirits of those forgotten souls, denied a proper stone to mark their existence, wander the grounds. The most chilling encounter involves a figure, often described as a weary, spectral woman, seen weeping near a cluster of unmarked graves. She is believed to be searching for a child lost to the harsh life of the colony, a grief so potent it has transcended time. A whisper on the wind, a sudden drop in temperature, these are the haunting echoes of the past, a poignant reminder of the unwritten histories buried beneath your very feet. 2. Green Hills Burial Ground, Windsor. Step back in time to the very beginnings of Windsor, where the Green Hills Burial Ground stands as a testament to the town's raw and brutal origins. Established as the first burial ground in the Hawkesbury district around 1806, it was the final resting place for the district's earliest inhabitants, including a large number of convicts. Here, many were laid to rest without ceremony, their lives ending in a whisper, their graves unmarked. The ground holds the memories of men who faced the gallows at the nearby Windsor courthouse, their desperate pleas for mercy forever imprinted on the soil. Today, this quiet green space is anything but peaceful. It is a site steeped in a haunting aura that whispers of its grim past. On dark nights, people report hearing the faint, mournful cries of those who were hanged, their spirits trapped in an endless loop of their final moments. There are stories of an unseen presence, a chilling touch on the shoulder, or the feeling of being watched by a multitude of unseen eyes. A particularly unsettling account comes from those who say they have felt the aura of important men and women, a sudden sense of importance and despair that is not their own. Some visitors have even claimed to feel the presence of a woman named Mary, who died in the 1800s, her ghostly form flitting through the trees, a silent and sorrowful guardian of the forgotten. The spirits of Green Hills are not malevolent, but rather a somber, lingering energy, a history lesson in the form of a chill that runs down your spine. 3. Windsor Catholic Cemetery, Windsor. Nestled on the outskirts of Windsor lies the Catholic Cemetery, a place of quiet reflection for the living, and perhaps, for the dead. Before it became a place of rest, its history was intertwined with the hardships and simple faith of the early Catholic settlers in the region. Many Irish immigrants, seeking a new life away from the famine and persecution of their homeland, found their final peace here. The ornate crosses and weathered tombstones tell a story of perseverance, of families who clung to their faith in a new and challenging world. But this sacred ground is also a nexus of unexplained activity. A haunting wail, like a lost soul crying in the darkness, is said to echo from the trees that line the cemetery. The air is known to suddenly turn frigid, a cold spot so intense it feels like a ghostly touch. A particularly famous legend tells of an on-site groundskeeper who, for years, would turn off the lights at the end of the night, only to find them mysteriously switched back on. The most chilling accounts, however, are of visitors being pushed or stumbling, as if an invisible force has moved them. Some even claim to have seen a shadowy figure, often described as a grieving woman, who vanishes when approached. The Windsor Catholic Cemetery is not just a collection of graves, it's a place where the sorrow of the past is still a very real, tangible presence. 4. Windsor Presbyterian Cemetery, Windsor. The Windsor Presbyterian Cemetery, with its solemn headstones and quiet dignity, stands as a monument to the Scottish and Protestant settlers who helped build the Hawkesbury region. Their history is one of quiet determination, of laying down roots and building a community guided by faith and tradition. Many of the graves here belong to prominent early families, their names etched into stone as a permanent record of their legacy. Before the ghostly encounters, the cemetery was a simple, peaceful final home for a hard-working people. Yet, This solemnity is often pierced by an unnerving sense of unease. Visitors report feeling an intense pressure on their chest, a suffocating sensation that subsides as quickly as it appears. The most persistent legend is of a spirit known as the Grave Guardian, a malevolent entity said to protect a specific, but unknown, grave. It's a legend whispered among locals, with few details, yet the feeling it inspires is very real. There are reports of disembodied voices, and shadowy figures seen moving between the tombstones, figures that seem to dissolve into thin air. One of the most eerie incidents involved a witness who heard a persistent, rhythmic tapping sound, as if from an unseen hand, only to have a cold chill suddenly envelop them. The Presbyterian Cemetery is a place where the weight of history and the unresolved past creates a palpable, and sometimes frightening, presence. 5. Richmond Lawn Cemetery, General Cemetery, Richmond. Beyond the bustling streets of Richmond lies a place of both tranquil beauty and unsettling lore, the Richmond Lawn Cemetery. This burial ground's history is tied to the expansion of the Hawkesbury district in the 19th and 20th centuries, as it became the final resting place for many who witnessed the region's growth. Its well-kept lawns and modern headstones give it a serene appearance, a stark contrast to the dramatic tales whispered by those who have spent time within its gates. It is a place that feels, by all accounts, far too modern to hold a sinister past, and yet, the chilling accounts suggest otherwise. The hauntings here are less about history and more about a chilling, palpable presence. The cemetery is famous for a feeling of intense sadness that visitors describe, a profound grief that seems to cling to the air. The most common reports involve a disembodied voice, often described as a child's quiet sob, coming from a section of unmarked graves. But perhaps the most unnerving encounter is that of a dark figure, described as an older gentleman in a suit, seen standing motionless by a grave near the entrance. He is said to watch visitors with an unnerving stillness before simply vanishing. The most famous story involves a groundskeeper who, late one night, found the figure standing near a freshly dug plot. When he called out, the figure turned and the groundskeeper was overcome by a wave of cold so intense, he swore he could see his breath in the night air. The figure simply dissipated, leaving the man shivering, not from the cold, but from the realization that he was not alone. The Richmond Lawn Cemetery is a reminder that the dead do not always rest quietly, even on the most manicured of lawns. 6. Old Pitt Town Cemetery, Pitt Town. Nestled in the quaint and historic village of Pitt Town, the Old Pitt Town Cemetery is a portal to the past. Before it was a place of ghosts and whispers, it was a simple, rustic burial ground that served the early farming community. Its gravestones, many now weathered and barely legible, mark the final resting places of hard-working pioneers, many of whom were among the first free settlers in the colony. Their lives were a story of resilience, of clearing the land, and of building a life far from the familiar shores of Britain. But a sense of unease hangs in the air here, a feeling that something is not quite right. A famous encounter, often recounted by locals, tells of a shadowy figure, sometimes described as a woman in a long dress, seen wandering the graves. She is said to be searching for something, her movements slow and sorrowful. But the most chilling legend of Pitt Town Cemetery involves the spirit of a child. Witnesses have reported hearing the faint, melodic tune of a nursery rhyme, only to discover there is no one else around. The sound often seems to come from an area with a number of child graves. Others have claimed to feel the tug on their clothing or the distinct feeling of a small, unseen hand holding theirs. It's a presence that is not threatening, but deeply sorrowful, a spirit perhaps seeking comfort in a place that holds her eternal rest. The Old Pitt Town Cemetery's haunting is a poignant and heartbreaking echo of a life cut too short, a spectral lullaby in the stillness of the night. 7. Lower Portland General Cemetery, Lower Portland. Hidden along the banks of the mighty Hawkesbury River, the Lower Portland General Cemetery holds a history intertwined with the ebb and flow of the water itself. This serene, secluded graveyard served the riverboat captains, farmers, and timber workers who relied on the Hawkesbury for their livelihood. Before it was known for its spectral inhabitants, it was simply a peaceful place of rest for a community built on grit and hard work. The graves here tell a story of a life lived on the water, of both triumphs and tragedies. But the peaceful setting belies a more sinister reputation. Locals and visitors alike speak of a pervasive, heavy atmosphere, a feeling of being watched from the surrounding trees. The most famous haunting is that of a ghostly figure, described as a man in old-fashioned work clothes, who is said to emerge from the river itself and walk among the graves. He is believed to be the spirit of a man who drowned in the Hawkesbury, his soul forever tethered to the place where he met his end. There are also reports of cold spots that move inexplicably through the cemetery, and of disembodied whispers that seem to come from all directions at once. The most famous story involves a couple who were picnicking near the cemetery. They heard what sounded like a heated argument between unseen people, and when they looked to see who it was, the sounds simply stopped, leaving a profound and unnerving silence. The river itself seems to hold a memory of these lost souls, and the cemetery is the place where they continue to make their presence known. 8. St Albans General Cemetery, St Albans. Tucked away in the historic and isolated village of St Albans, the General Cemetery is a place where time seems to have stood still. Its history is deeply rooted in the story of the MacDonald Valley, a remote and rugged landscape settled by convicts and pioneers. Many of the people buried here were among the first inhabitants of the area, their lives defined by hard work and the isolation of this beautiful but unforgiving landscape. Before its haunted reputation, it was simply a quiet, forgotten corner of history. But in this stillness, there are restless souls. The most famous haunting is tied to the infamous St Albans Courthouse, located just across the street. The area is said to be haunted by a number of specters, including a ghostly rider on horseback, often seen galloping through the cemetery and down the main street. He is believed to be a convict who met his end in the valley and is now forever searching for an escape. But perhaps the most chilling story involves the spirit of a little girl, said to haunt the cemetery, crying out for her lost doll. Visitors have reported hearing a child's voice, pleading in the darkness, and the distinct feeling of a small hand holding theirs. The most famous encounter involves a person who, while walking through the graves, heard a little girl's voice whisper, "Can you help me find my doll?" When they turned, there was no one there, and the air turned so cold that the witness was overcome with a profound sense of terror. The St Albans Cemetery is a place where the echoes of a harsh past are not just felt, but heard and experienced, a place where the dead refuse to be silenced.